Welcome back to the Black Hour, where we tell the kind of stories that keep you awake long after they end.
The cabin sat on a ridge like a tooth in a jaw of pines. From the dirt road, the house broke the skyline. Dark clapboard, a porch that sagged on one side, a stone chimney with moss eating one corner. The property map said 6 acres, the county. Recorder had a stamped deed, and the siblings had a key wrapped in old tissue paper. Those were the things people liked to trust: paper and metal, and the weight of a signature. It did not occur to them that land could hold memory in the way a person holds a grudge. When the family arrived in late October, the light on the ridge was cold and thin. Wind ran through the trees like a moving hand. The car carried 3 of them: Anna, who had inherited the place, her brother Mark, and Mark's wife, Lila. They were tired from the drive and the sorting. None of them lived in town anymore. None of them had any use for a cabin that needed a new roof and a heating system that coughed. They planned the week to clean, make a decision, and get on a bus back to city life. The first night the house was more quiet than empty. There was the steady tick of settling wood. The stove coughed when Mark lit it, and the flame did not take evenly. They slept with the curtains open because it felt less like hiding. Halfway through the night, Lila woke, thinking she heard a footstep on the porch. It was a soft, measured press, like somebody walking on the ball of a foot. She told herself it was the wind, the porch settling. She did not tell them in the morning because the porch looked intact. The impression of careful steps slid into her like a splinter. On day 2, they found a small pit behind the shed. It was shallow, like a grave someone had started and changed their mind about. The soil was darker in the bottom and smelled faintly of iron. There was a stone with initials carved on it, but the letters were old and stilled by lichen. Anna ran her fingers along the cut and felt a chill that was not the late October air. She dug a little with her hands and found nothing but a scrap of cloth and a few old nails. She wrapped the cloth in plastic and put it in the kitchen drawer with a careful reverence, as if these things were evidence of a story she had not yet earned. On the 3rd night, a radio they did not own began to turn on in the afternoon. They were in the kitchen, and the old radio in the corner crackled and played a bit of music, an old folk song that stopped and clicked like someone rewinding. Mark unplugged it. It was a cheap, modern clock radio with no batteries and a blinking red light under dust. The plug in the wall was still where it had been. They shrugged. Old houses made little rebellions. Lila began to feel like the house had pockets of sound. It opened on its own. Later that evening, they found a ledger buried in a false bottom of an upstairs drawer. The ledger was narrow and bound in leather gone soft with time. The handwriting inside had been careful and small. It read as accounts do: dates, names, exchanges. The entries were odd. They noted hens, a barrel of flour, a pair of boots traded for work, and a line that returned like a landline wire. October 14th, paid 1 night, 1 silence. Signed, H. Anna read it aloud without meaning to call attention. The word paid sat heavy on the page, and each time her mouth shaped it, something in the room tightened. Mark said the entries were the sort of ledger farmhouse people kept. Farmers recorded barter and credit. Lila, who had grown up in apartments, felt the ledger like a mirror that angled towards something she could not yet see. They were careful about the ledger at first. They took pictures of it with their phones and put it back under the false bottom. That night, when Mark went outside to spit and look at the stars, the porch light flicked and then the door clicked, closed behind him. He padded back to the kitchen and found the ledger on the table. The page opened to a new line. The ink on the page looked fresher than the other lines, as if someone had come in while they were out and written between breaths. The new line read, October 24th, households 3. Due, 1 night. Mark shut the book and put it on the shelf. He cracked a joke about the house keeping a guest list. The casualness of the joke did not reach the skin of his face. That night, The wind came in a way that sounded like a low voice through the chimneys. Lila lay awake, counting the muffled noises, and sometimes the house sounded as if it were inhaling and holding itself. On the 5th day, Anna found a small circle of faded stones near the back tree line. They were set in a shallow ring, 3 feet across, and inside the ring the grass was a different color. It had not sprouted the way the rest did. There were small impressions in the soil, like the marks animals make when they circle and kneel. She knelt and reached out and felt, with a deeper certainty than thought, that those 3 feet had been visited by people making a plan. She thought of bargains. That afternoon they hit and split an old photograph between the floorboards. The image was a studio portrait of a man and woman in stiff dress, each with their hands on a child, and under the gloss, their faces had been scored with a sharp object. The blunt scratches ran through the eyes in clean, indiscriminate lines. The marks had been made before the photograph had been set under the floor, as if someone had had the photograph and then, without the rage of a sudden violence, had put a needle through the faces and then left them there as a ritual. The ledger had words now they could not explain, names with debts owed. That night, it rained hard. Rain on a tin roof has a temperament. It drums and thuds and makes the bones of a house sound animal. The family sat in the living room, 3 shadows near each other on an old sofa. Mark read out loud from the ledger because the act of saying the names felt safer than keeping them shut. He read names and the ledger kept giving details. 1 cow, 1 week's milk, 1 promise. There was 1 line that had no date, no curl of year. It simply said, "When house holds more than its own, the mountain remembers the tally." They argued in tired, small ways about whether to stay. Anna wanted to list the place and be done with it. Mark wanted to go the next day and take the ledger to the county. Lila wanted a shower and a marathon of something, and to forget the smell of iron in the pit behind the shed. They settled on a compromise. They would stay the week. Paper and signatures still had the ring of authority. On the 7th night, Lila woke with the taste of dirt in her mouth. She thought she had dreamed of an old woman who had pressed something into her palm and whispered, "Take care, take care." When she blinked awake, the kitchen table was set with 3 bowls, each containing a single spoon standing upright in dry, cold oatmeal. The bowls were dust-muted and it belonged to no one in the family. They were thin-lipped and hairline cracked, older than the ledger. There was a fine layer of ash in the bowls, as if someone had burned something small and then left the remnants to cool. None of them were hungry. Mark took up a bowl and shook the ash out and laid it on the porch steps. When he turned back, the ledger sat on the table open to the entry he had not seen before. The new line stated, plain as a bill, night of the 738. Due reduced. 1 night becomes 2. They stared at the page. The house had counted without permission. It had taken inventory in the way of a ledger that loved precision. The math of the entries did not make sense. How could a night become 2? A night measured in hours could not double itself. But the ledger had the authority of handwriting and old ink. It sounded like something final when it read itself in their minds. That night the house did not feel like something they rented. It felt like a ledger with wood and nails around it, a thing keeping account and asking the living to reconcile. At 2 in the morning, a sound came from under the floor. It began like a faraway tapping, the kind one hears only in old houses where wood and nail and time talk to each other. Then the tap grew purposeful and like a knock with a rhythm. The family sat up in the living room, wrapped in blankets with the TV off and the phone screens dead with static. The tapping was patient. It traveled through the floor in long pulses. Under that tapping, something else **** crossed the room and knelt by the stair tread. The board beneath his hand had a seam, and with his fingers he dug at the seam until it gave. Beneath was a hollow, and inside the hollow the ledger lay closed like a throat, He opened it and found white dust, as if the air had been poured across the pages in a soft cloud. But dust was not the only thing. Pressed between pages was a small bundle tied with twine. He untied it with the same precise impatience people use on old knots. Inside the cloth was a coin, a little flat disc with scratches, and a scrap of paper that smelled of damp earth. The scrap had a single line: "Take and leave the tally with your blood." The letters were exact. The coin had on one side the image of a house with a tree, and on the other side a ring of dots like counting marks. When Mark showed them, Anna's hand shook. The mountain behind the house sloped down like a spine. They had a sense that beyond any human ledger, there was a geography that kept other books' rocks with names. Stands of pine that remembered whom they shaded dot asterisk they debated leaving again. The reasonable plan was to pack the car and drive to town and hand the ledger to the sheriff. The less reasonable thing, the dangerous human thing, was to keep the coin in the scrap and make sense of it within the house where the memory had been kept. They slept poorly, each thinking of different ways to end the tally. At dawn, Anna walked the property line. The mountain was gentle, the maples stripped of leaves, the air so thin it bit. She found a shallow depression in the moss where the earth had been churned like kneaded dough. There were tiny footprints. There, not like a child's, but like an adult's in a small size, the toes narrow and rounded. They walked to the old fence post and went around the cabin as if someone had made a circle and then pressed their feet into soft earth. Anna felt watched by everything: the trees, the sky, the leaning stones. On the porch, a smear of something dark and wet had dried into the lip of the step. It looked like tar, but smelled of iron. That evening, while they packed a trailer with the worst pieces of furniture, a neighbor came up the drive in an old truck. He called himself Earl, and he had lived down the mountain his whole life. He said little at first. He looked at the ledger on the table when Mark mentioned it and nodded as if to some memory. "You don't want to sign for what you can't leave," Earl said, and the sentence landed like a thrown stone. He told him about deals folks had made in years past, trades that sounded like superstitious bargains. A woman who wanted her house painted, a man who wanted his sick cow healed, a harvest saved in a drought. The mountain had a pattern of exchange. It wanted things returned in measures the mountain set. "How do you know what it wants?" Lila asked, small with fear. Earl shrugged. "It don't ask in words. It ain't clever like that. It asks with its own ways. Folks used to leave markers. Folks used to leave pieces of themselves. You keep nothing. You make a deal with your feet alone." He touched the ledger, absently, as if it were a shared joke, and the page under his finger was blank where they had been reading. "Once you give it something, it keeps account." They listened to Earl and felt both relief and dread. Relief because the thing had a name bargain, and dread because the name came with an accounting they had already entered. They had stayed a week. They had eaten from old bowls. They had found a coin and a directive to take and leave the tally with your blood. It sounded like a contract written in a language that twisted ordinary law. That night, the family tried a different approach. They sat with lights low and the ledger between them, and Anna spoke as if addressing a clerk. She said aloud the names on the ledger, the dates, the exchanges. She offered apologies into the old air, as if spoken confession could balance a scale. They tried leaving small offerings at the circle of stones, some coffee grounds, a spool of thread, a bottle cap. Each time something in the night shifted. The ash in the bowls brightened like a signal. The porch light stuttered like a wink. They felt the mountain leaning in to listen. As trees leaned to rain dot on the third night after the neighbor's visit, something happened that made negotiation impossible. The ledger open on the table turned pages on its own and stopped on a line where ink pooled darker than before. Where the new line should have been, a smear formed as if a finger had been dragged through wet ink. The smear dried in a pale brown tone. Where the smear had sat, there were two clear impressions in the paper, like the shape of a fingertip. Mark touched the paper and felt warmth. He tasted iron in his mouth as if old moss lay against his tongue. A slow pressure built at his sternum, a weight like someone resting palm to chest. The weight did not hurt. It simply meant the house had counted him. He left the room and came back with the coin and the scrap of paper. He laid the coin on the ledger and watched, helpless, as the coin sank into the paper as if the page itself accepted the currency. The coin vanished between fibers. He could not pry it out. It had been eaten by the book. Then, on the back steps, there was a sound like someone humming a patter. It was in the key of nothing they recognized, a partial lullaby or a counting in a soft voice. They traced the sound to the porch and found prints. The prints were not human or animal. They were perfect ovals with a ring of tiny impressions, like the coin's dots stamped into the soil. The ring pattern matched the coin. A bargain had been made. The ledger had accepted currency. The house had closed a tab. The line in the ledger now read, "Paid in coin. Balance closed. Still due. 2 nights." They had thought 2 nights meant 2 nights left to pay, or 2 nights the house would claim. The ledger's language was elliptical and indifferent. The house wanted a balance, and when it accepted a form of payment, it changed the term. They realized with a slow rising sickness that 2 nights could mean a doubling in the way the house thought about time. Not subtractive, but additive. The mountain did math they could not follow. That night Anna dreamed of the ledger with its pages opened like ribs. She walked between them and saw lines written in a hand that was older than human patience. Names stood in those lines, not like ink but like bones. She woke with a sting down her jaw where the dream had pressed a fingernail. There was no mark on her skin where the pain suggested. The ledger had made her remember in the same way. Old Wood remembers old nails dot at 2 in the morning. A sound came from the field beyond the circle of stones. It was a slow footfall, and then another. The family bundled themselves and went outside. The air was the hush that falls when a storm is promised but not yet arrived. In the half-dark of their lanterns, they saw motion at the tree line. Figures moved like cloth, slow and deliberate. They were not flesh. They looked like people if you stood far enough through fog and let your eyes soften. Up close, they had edges like the page of old paper folded in 100 hands. Earl appeared at the fence without the truck, as if he had been watching from his own chair and walked. He had a lantern and something else in his hand, a little bundle wrapped in oilcloth. He told them to keep the light low and to speak plainly as if to forest or ledger. He said the mountain would accept the correct names. It had an appetite for truth framed as exchange. "You can't haggle with a mountain," Earl said. "You can only show what you brought." They brought what they could. They took the ledger and set it on the stones and placed their offerings around its edges. Mark put a length of his hair coiled and wound into a ring. Lila put one of her earrings, small, a thing she had worn every day for years. Anna placed the photograph with the faces scored and the initials as tucked under the ledger's edge. They spoke the names and the debts aloud, in the way of accounting. Name, what was given, date. The lantern light trembled. The air smelled like wet paper dot from the tree line, came a long inhalation, and the air felt like someone reading a long list. The mountain did not speak in human voices. It made an effect like a sigh that lifted their hair. The ledger's pages fluttered as if in a draft of memory. One by one the offerings were taken. They were not stolen. They were accepted. The coin, however, did not return. Where Mark thought to place it again, the coin had sunk into the earth like a seed. Earl cleared his throat. "You give things," he said. "You show your tally. But there's a way a place takes. It takes in measure. You can't cheat it." He had the look of someone who had been taught by years of watching fields and weather how to read a slow cruelty. "2 nights," he said. "Ain't 2 hours. It's the mountains counting. Sometimes it counts in the passing of sleep. Sometimes it takes the length of a life. They argued that night about whether to accept the exchange, whether to let the mountain finish. They woke with the morning birds like thin coins in the light and were exhausted as if they had been running since midnight. The ledger had made them pay in ways that thinned their edges, ways that added weight to their sleep. They felt the mountain pressing, patient and unhurried. On the 9th night, Lila did not wake. In the morning, she lay as if asleep, peaceful in a quiet that was not death. She breathed, but slow and shallow, as if the mountain had tied a band around her ribs. Her skin had a faint gray, as if the light that rested on it had been measured and rationed. She could talk, but the words were fewer, pulled like small coins from a purse. When Mark shook her awake, she opened her eyes and saw the ledger on the table. She smiled with a mouth that had been edited. "We paid," she said, and the words were like someone signing a receipt. Panic ran like a fever. Anna drove into town and found Earl at the general store. He sold hardware and stories in equal measure. Anna asked if there had been anything in the past people who slept and did not wake, people who came to the ridge and left different. Earl nodded. "Once, long ago," he said, "a family tried to buy the land clean. They brought a chest of money. The mountain took the chest. The ledger closed." The youngest child didn't stop remembering the sound of tapping. Folks started waking up the way you did one by one in measures. He told her about an old woman who had returned to the ridge and scraped letters into the bark of a tree. "Do not sleep with the house. Do not count with paper." Anna went back to the cabin holding nothing but a worn pack and the ledger, rolled tight. She found Mark pale and thin, reading names like a man trying to learn a map. Lila was in a chair, awake and quiet, moving her fingers across the armrest as if playing a small instrument. The ledger lay open between them and had a new entry in. A hand that seemed to come from the grain of the wood itself. 991 breath loaned. Balance, owed in halves. They tried to leave. They packed the car and the trailer and got the engine running. The road was slick with the wet of late October, and the trees leaned in like an audience. As they pulled to the end of the drive, the car stalled. Electronics went dead. The dashboard dimmed like tired fire. The engine coughed and then stopped. They pushed and started and stopped, and the car would only tick like a clock with a missing hand. From the shoulder of the road, the mountain watched. The ledger had taught them that the mountain's addressing was not only in place, but in time. It could delay an exit. It could ask for a night that lasted in the space between leaving and reaching anywhere else. They tried again. The map pinned and the motor worked, but the road led them back. When they finally made it to the county line, dawn broke and the car turned over easily. The mountain had given them the outward road, but it kept some of the distance inside them. They tried to live afterward like people who had been to the edge of silent water and learned to breathe differently. Lila's sleep was shallow. Mark woke each morning with a small, precise ache under his sternum, like a coin left on a bone. Anna folded the ledger into a chest and went to the bank to ask about deeds and old notes. Papermen looked at her politely and told her old land could have covenants. They pointed to easements and mineral rights, but the words were cold and rational beside the way the ledger had lived. They did not return to the ridge. They thought they had left payments in the field, the hair ring, the earring, the photograph, but the ledger had kept a tab. 2 nights had meant the house would mark 2 times where their lives would be altered. It measured not in hours, but in weight. Over the months, each of them found the mountain's arithmetic inserting itself into ordinary things. Lila would wake sometimes and find a bowl of ash on her kitchen table at home. Mark began to wake with fingerprints in the dust of his car. Anna dreamed of a ledger and woke with lines of faint ink across her palms. Years later, long after the house had been sold to someone who claimed they would restore it, children in the valley told each other of the cabin on the ridge. They said the porch sometimes creaked at night in a pattern like counting. They said the new owners had found odd coins under floorboards and had uncovered a ledger. They said one of the owners had gone away for a night and come back different. The land kept its accounts. In the end, the ledger did what ledgers do. It recorded. It was a patient clerk who knew the slow rules of exchange. The mountain wanted a balance in measures it chose, and it would accept payment in sleep, in memory, in the soft stuff of living. People thought they could trade objects and signatures, and that paper would be enough. The mountain had a different currency. It asked in a language of hush. Once, on a winter morning when snow had laid itself like a hush over the ridge, a boy found a coin half buried in the path. He picked it up and ran it across the rough of his thumb. There were dots around the edge like a ring. He slipped it into his pocket and forgot it until night. That night, he woke with the taste of iron in his mouth and a slow pressure at his chest, as if someone had leaned on him with a friendly hand and then never left. His mother found the coin in his laundry the next day and laughed and set it on the mantle. The ledger waits, the mountain counts. The house on the ridge keeps its books. Asterisk. The mountain kept a language none of them had spoken before they'd arrived, and when they left, a part of their life stayed behind as payment. Tell us where you're listening from in the comments. If the air on your skin felt colder when the ledger opened, like someone reading a long list, give this story a like and subscribe for more from the Black Hour Stories.
A night shift guard takes an easy job at an abandoned county hospital. The halls are empty, but the machines still call names only the dead should answer. Welcome back to the Black Hour Stories. Tonight's title promised a long stretch of real fear, and this first tale brings you into a building that should have been silent forever. A guard takes a shift in an old county hospital, thinking he'll patrol empty rooms and catch a little rest. But the hospital hasn't forgotten the names of the people who died inside its walls, and it hasn't stopped calling them. The county hospital sat alone on a rise above town. It had been closed for almost 20 years, left to peel and rust, and grown its way through the seasons. The boards on the windows didn't keep the wind out. The chain on the main doors hung loose because the last storm had pulled one hinge off. No one had walked the halls legally in years. But the county still needed a warm body to guard it at night, because kids like to break in for dares, and scrappers like to steal old copper. That was how Nolan got the job, night shift guard. Midnight to 6. He didn't care about the pay. He cared about the quiet. He was 2 years out of the service, still waking from dreams that shook him. A dead hospital seemed like the softest place in the world. The first night was easy. He sat in a folding chair by the old nurses' station on the first floor. He read a paperback, drank cold coffee, walked the halls once an hour. The floors creaked the same way all old places do, small, soft, tired noises. Nothing weird. On his second night, he brought a radio. Not a fancy one. Just a small handheld police scanner type that picked up static from different channels. He liked the white noise. It made him feel less alone. Around 1:30 in the morning, the radio cracked and hissed, then played a voice. Old, female, soft, a single word. Next, he froze. Radio static swung back in like nothing had happened. He turned the dial, nothing but white hiss. Then he remembered something. In old hospitals, nurses used to call next when a patient in line outside the exam room was ready. He'd seen it in movies. He told himself maybe he'd picked up an old broadcast bouncing somewhere. He unplugged the radio and left it alone. At 2 a.m., he heard wheels. Not fast wheels, slow, steady, rolling like someone pushing a small cart on uneven tile. He stood from the chair and walked to the intersection of the halls. The sound grew louder. He clicked on his flashlight and shined it down the left wing. Nothing. Just old linoleum buckled from water damage. The rolling sound stopped. When he turned around to head back, he saw a shape at the far end of the other hall. A shadow, thin, upright, a person maybe, but too far to tell. He moved the flashlight toward it. The shape vanished. Not walked away, not ducked into a room. It blinked out like someone hitting a switch. He checked the doors, checked the windows, no signs of forced entry. He laughed at himself and went back to the nurse's station. His hands shook. He didn't like that. Night 3, he kept the lights off. He wanted to hear the building. He wanted to know if the sounds came from pipes or wind. If there was a leak somewhere, that could explain the rolling sound. Water dripping down old pipes can echo in weird ways. He sat in the dark with only the little desk lamp behind him. The building breathed differently tonight. Every hallway felt cooler than the last. The temperature dipped enough to fog his breath. He rubbed his hands together and tried to stay awake. At 1:20, the overhead speaker crackled. He jumped out of his seat and stared up. The speaker above the nurse's station hadn't worked in years. It was rusted around the edges with a thick web over one corner. But it crackled again, and this time the voice was as clear as someone standing next to him. Room 214, a room assignment. He didn't want to check. Every part of him knew he should call it in, say he heard something, and wait outside. But he also didn't want to be the guy who panicked over an old speaker in an old hospital. So he went. The second floor smelled like dust and old tape. The stairwell groaned when he stepped onto the landing. Light from the moon fell through cracks in the boarded windows and made stripes on the floor. He reached room 214. The door stood open. Inside, the tiles were cracked and the windows were rimmed with mold. A broken bed frame leaned crooked against the far wall. There was nothing unusual, nothing alive. He stepped inside. The room exhaled. A cold draft brushed past him like someone sliding by to exit. He smelled something faint, old antiseptic, sharp and sour, the kind used back when hospitals smelled like metal and bleach more than anything else. He backed out. As he stepped into the hallway, he heard the wheels again, slow, rolling toward him. His flashlight flickered once, then steadied. The wheels stopped just outside his beam of light. He forced himself to shine the flashlight forward. The hallway was empty, but the smell of antiseptic thickened. He left the second floor fast. On night 4, he came in tired and worn. Figured maybe his mind was playing tricks. He didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in lonely buildings and suggestion and nerves stretched thin. He told himself the next 6 hours would be normal. At 12:43, the radio crackled again. A man's voice this time, a deep voice with weight behind it. The kind that smokes 2 packs a day. Vitals dropping. Static swallowed the words. Then the radio hissed out a long, steady tone. He dropped it. The tone kept going even after it hit the floor. A long, high, single beep. The sound monitors make when a heart stops. He kicked the radio. It skidded across the floor. The tone died. Silence filled the hall. He wanted to quit. But quitting meant explaining. And explaining meant saying things he didn't have words for. He stayed. That night the machines woke up. At 1:15, he heard the whir of something turning on. A soft mechanical hum. He followed it down the west wing. The room at the end glowed faintly blue under the door. He pushed it open. An old heart monitor sat on a metal cart, screen cracked, dust thick around the buttons. None of it was plugged in, wires curled up like dead vines. And yet, the screen lit. A pulse line crawled across the display. A slow, steady beat filled the room. He stared. The heartbeat on the monitor matched his own, every pulse in his chest. Every thud. Perfect sync. He reached out and touched the metal cart. It was ice cold. The monitor beeped faster. His heart matched. He backed out of the room and slammed the door. The beeping continued for a full minute, muffled by the door. Then, slowly, it fell quiet. He didn't tell anyone. Night 5, the worst. He came in early, planning to stay near the entrance. No wandering tonight, no patrols. If something wanted him, it could do it from 20 feet away in plain sight. He sat with his back against the wall near the main doors. At 11:58, the overhead speaker crackled again. This time the voice wasn't calm. It screamed. A sharp, ripping scream full of pain and fear and something else, anger. The scream cut through him like a blade. He dropped the flashlight. It rolled across the floor. The scream stopped. Silence. Then the speaker whispered. "Nolan." He froze. The building knew his name. He didn't breathe for almost 10 seconds. He grabbed his phone and called the security supervisor. The call rang, then went silent. Not to voicemail. Just silent, as if someone pressed a finger over the line. His phone screen flickered, then turned black. He stood. The main doors behind him rattled. Someone or something pushed from the outside. He turned. The chains on the door tightened. The metal groaned. The building shook. Then the chains stopped moving. He backed away. The lights in the hallway flickered. One by one, they went out. Dark spread down the corridor like ink spilling from a bottle. A soft rolling sound followed, the wheels, slow, coming closer. He ran down the east wing, past empty rooms, past old gurneys with broken legs, past peeling paint and cracked tiles. He reached the stairwell, took the steps 2 at a time, reached the second floor landing. He heard footsteps above him. Steady, measured, someone walking the 3rd floor. He didn't want to go up. He didn't want to go down. The hospital wanted him to choose. He chose the 2nd floor again. Better the devil he'd already seen. When he reached the hallway, every door stood open. Room after room, open like waiting mouths. The overhead speaker crackled. "Nolan, room 214. He shook his head. "No," he whispered. The speaker clicked off. The doors slammed shut. Every single one at once. The echo traveled down the hall like a drum line. He stepped backward. Room 214 creaked open by itself. Only that one. Inside, something moved. He felt the air shift. Heavy, pulled, like gravity skewed inside the room. He tried to run, but the hallway lights flickered and died. Complete dark. He felt someone grab his wrist. Cold fingers. Thin. Long. He swung his flashlight. The beam stuttered. Caught a glimpse. A figure in a hospital gown. Bare feet. Face pale and blurred like a photograph smeared with water. The figure leaned close. Its mouth barely moved. "You forgot to check out." He tore free and ran down the stairs. Across the hall. Through the broken main door. Out into the cold night air. He didn't stop running until he reached the fence at the edge of the lot. He turned. The hospital windows were dark. All except one, room 214. A single light burned inside. And in that window stood a shape, watching him. He didn't go back. He quit. No notice, no explanation. He moved to a different county. Different job, different life. For a few nights he slept. Then the call started. Unknown number. Always at 1 in the morning. When he answered, he heard the sound of wheels, rolling, slow, steady, looking for him. Some places keep working long after everyone inside has died. And some buildings learn the names of the living the same way they remember the dead. Tell us where you're listening from in the comments. And if you heard something in the quiet when that room door opened, give this story a like and subscribe for more from the Black Hour Stories. A simple case of sleep trouble grows into something that follows a man from his bed into daylight. The shadow learns his schedule, his habits, and finally his name. Welcome back to the Black Hour Stories. Tonight's promise was a long stretch of real fear, and this second tale goes after the quiet minutes before morning. A man thinks he's dealing with sleep paralysis, but what holds him down isn't part of any dream. Stay with this one. There's more than breath in the dark when something waits for the moment you can't move. The first time it happened, David didn't think too much of it. It was 3 in the morning. His apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that only cities know when the bars have closed and the buses have paused. He woke flat on his back with a weight on his chest. He couldn't lift his arms, couldn't turn his head. His eyes stayed open. The ceiling looked the same, hairline cracks, faint streetlight glow through the blinds. He took a slow breath and felt the pressure push down on him, as if some careful hand held him steady. He tried to speak, but the sound stuck in his throat like a swallowed pebble. He could see the corner of the room by the door, where the light from outside made a soft triangle on the floor. Something darker than the dark stepped into that soft patch. It wasn't a shape with edges. It was the absence of everything else. He blinked. When he opened his eyes again, he was free. The weight was gone. He sat up fast, sweating. The apartment looked exactly as he'd left it, dish towel on the chair, laptop open on the counter, a mug next to the sink with a little tea stuck to the bottom. Work in the morning, normal life in every corner. But the pressure on his chest had felt real, solid, measured, almost. He told himself the same thing 1,000 others tell themselves. Sleep paralysis, stress, overwork, the mind half awake and half caught in its own wiring. He believed that right up until the second night. Night 2, same hour, same position flat, arms pinned by nothing he could see. His vision sharpened as if someone had turned the focus dial inside his skull. The corner by the door deepened. That black patch thickened, collecting itself like a shadow, deciding it wanted a body. The pressure on his chest changed this time. It wasn't just heavy. It had rhythm, like slow breathing. He tried to push against it. Nothing moved. The shape leaned closer. More a tilt in the air than a body. A slant where the room's geometry bent wrong for a heartbeat. He felt warmth on his cheek, like a sigh. His right eye teared from the strain of trying to move it. Then he blinked again, and the room snapped back. He could sit. He could breathe in full. The clock on his nightstand showed 3:11. His throat burned like he'd been trying to yell. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. By the third morning, the panic had turned to a tight annoyance. He worked in IT, long hours in a cold building with lights that buzzed. People came to him all day with their small emergencies, their forgotten passwords, their glitchy screens. He listened, fixed what he could, nodded along. But every time he blinked long or rubbed his eyes, he saw that dark shape leaning out of the corner of his memory. He started checking the clock more often than usual, counting down the hours until sleep like a man inching toward a cliff. Night 3 brought something new, no paralysis at first. He slept curled on his side, blanket pulled high under his chin. For a short time he dreamed, but the dream felt borrowed, like someone else's old thought. He saw a hallway lined with doors. Each door had a number carved into it. None of the numbers were his. He woke to the sense of someone sitting on the bed. Not lying, sitting, the mattress dipped by his ankles. Breath left him in a shaky push. He didn't move, didn't dare. When he looked toward the edge of the bed, nothing was there. But he felt that weight, warm and deliberate. Something old and patient had learned how to mimic the simple act of sitting. He tried to shift his toes. They didn't move. The shape appeared again, farther from the door this time, closer to him. It hovered in raw stillness, as if the air wrapped around it differently. He couldn't see arms or legs, but he could feel the sense of a posture leaning forward, curious, almost friendly in a way that made his stomach twist. The room's shadows stretched toward it, pulled like threads drawn to a magnet. He blinked, and the pressure vanished. This time his chest hurt, like someone had pressed too hard for too long. He sat up with a gasp and checked his ribs. They were tender under his fingers. By morning his voice shook when he tried to order coffee. The barista asked if he was all right. He lied. Of course he lied. What was he supposed to say? Something watches me sleep. He went to work and found himself counting the shadows under desks, behind racks of hardware, in the corners where the fluorescent lights didn't fully reach. Every dark place felt like a mouth ready to open, On the fourth night he made a plan. He drank strong tea at 10. He set his phone alarm for 2:55. He propped himself up with pillows so he wouldn't be on his back. He watched a comedy show until his brain felt soft. And then he woke at 3:11 anyway. Flat, pinned, breath thin. The shape wasn't in the corner anymore. It stood or hovered or existed right beside his bed. The darkness around it was deeper than the rest of the room. He saw nothing of a face, nothing human, but he felt a tension. The kind of attention a wild thing gives before it makes its first move. Pressure on his chest tightened. He tried to breathe in, but the breath only filled halfway. His heart banged hard like someone knocking from inside his ribs. The shape leaned closer. A coldness passed over his face. Not the temperature of air, but the cold of being next to something that didn't share the same rules of heat or life. The cold came from inside the shape, like it had no warmth to give it all. He blinked and the room snapped back, just like before. But this time the shape didn't disappear fully. For the first time in 4 nights, it left something behind. A whisper. He didn't hear it with his ears. He felt it at the base of his skull, like someone blowing faint air across nerves. A single word, drawn out, quiet, unmistakable. Soon, he sat up shaking. His mouth was dry, his hands cold. He turned on every light in the apartment and kept them on until dawn. The next morning his co-workers noticed. They asked if he was sick. He said allergies. One said he looked like he hadn't slept in days. He laughed it off. But inside his mind, that whisper replayed. Soon. For the next few nights it didn't come. He slept badly, but no weight, no paralysis. He tried to convince himself it had been stress, that his brain had used some trick to scare him. He started staying at the office late, not wanting to go home. He left lights on in every corner. He opened windows for noise. He let the TV play through the night. Nothing happened. But on the 7th night, something new changed the rules. He was not in his apartment. He didn't remember falling asleep. He didn't remember lying down. He was simply there, standing barefoot on cold tile in a narrow hallway lit by a yellow bulb. The air smelled faintly of bleach and old paper. The walls were too close, painted a dull institutional white. Doors lined the left side. Each door had a number. The same numbers from his earlier dream. He was dreaming, he told himself. Just another strange half-sleep. He touched the wall. It felt warm. So real it made his breath hitch. Something moved behind the door marked 14. A tap. Then another, slow, precise. He backed away. The hallway stretched behind him, longer than any building he had ever been in, longer than it should have been. Far down that hallway, something stood beneath the buzzing light. A human shape, but unmoving. A silhouette. He whispered, "Wake up." The figure began walking toward him. He turned and ran. His feet slapped the tile, cold burn sharp. Door numbers slid past him, 18, 21, 25, until he found a door with no number at all. He grabbed the handle and yanked it open. His bedroom, not a dream image of his bedroom. His actual bedroom, same blanket, same lamp, same cracked blinds. Something grabbed his ankle as he leapt through. A cold grip, not like a hand. More like a strip of shadow wound tight around him. He kicked hard. His heel struck something solid. The grip fell away. He scrambled across his own floor, slammed into his bed, and when he looked up, the door behind him was gone. Just the wall, blank. He woke the next morning under the blanket, but every muscle in his body felt sore as if he had been running, fighting, twisting. His ankle had a bruise shaped like 4 small ovals. He worked from home that day, staring at the dark line under the bedroom door. Every so often he thought he saw movement, a shift, a change in tone, like something was testing the boundary from the other side. That night he didn't sleep, not even a minute. He sat up with the lights on, watching the corners, listening. At 2 in the morning, nothing happened. At 3, nothing. At 4, silence thickened like a blanket. But at 5:22, his phone buzzed, an alarm he had never set. The screen said, "Wake up." When he picked it up, the time changed, 3:11. The screen flickered. The room dimmed. And the weight hit his chest before he could scream. This time it was crushing. His ribs creaked. He couldn't breathe at all. The shape loomed above him, darker than any shadow should be. Its edges quivered like smoke. He felt arms not arm shapes pressing down. He could hear something now, not a whisper, not a voice, a slow, deep inhale, as if the shape was breathing him in. He tried to move his fingers. One twitched. That gave him a shred of strength. He strained until his left hand slipped an inch off the sheet. The shape froze. Then it leaned so close he felt the cold soak into his bones. And the whisper came again, almost tender. "You're awake." He blinked. When he opened his eyes, the thing was gone, but his body didn't move. Not for 30 full seconds. 30 seconds of lying there like a body waiting to be claimed. Over the next days, the thing changed its pattern. It didn't always show itself. Sometimes he just felt the weight on his chest at random hours. Once in the shower, he felt it press between his shoulder blades, pushing him forward until his forehead hit the tile. Once in the grocery store, the lights flickered and every single shadow under the shelves stretched toward him like hands. And once, while he sat on the bus, his reflection in the window didn't move when he did. It sat perfectly still for a beat too long, then it smiled. He didn't. His reflection's lips formed a word. Soon. He stopped leaving the house after that. Sleep came in snatches, 10 minutes here, 30 there. Each time he woke gasping, clawing, fighting the weight. His ribs ached, his vision blurred. He started writing notes on paper. "You are awake, stand up, move your hand." By the 12th night, he hadn't slept more than an hour at a time. His mind felt thin, like a sheet left in rain. At 3:11, he woke to the worst silence he had ever heard. A silence so deep at its shape, so heavy it made his ears ring. The air around him thickened like wet cloth. He couldn't move. The weight on his chest came slow this time, like a blanket being laid over him inch by inch. He felt the pressure along his ribs, along his throat, along the line of his jaw. And the shape rose beside the bed, taller now, more formed, less shadow, more outline. A humanoid thing in the vaguest sense. Shoulders, a head tilted forward. He felt breath leave him. The thing leaned down until the room went utterly black. It pressed its forehead to his, not cold this time, warm, human warm. A voice filled his head in a way that felt like drowning. No more nights. His vision blurred, and he felt himself pulled backward, not into sleep, but into something behind sleep. Something cold, wide, and hollow. He thought he heard doors opening. The hallway. The numbered doors. A soft tap from behind one. A whisper of movement behind another. And then the shape spoke again. "You're coming where you can't wake." He forced himself to scream. Forced every ounce of life into that breath. The sound tore out of him like breaking glass. The room snapped open. Lights on. Air normal. The pressure gone. For a long time he lay there shaking. Then he did the only thing he could think of. He packed his bags. He didn't care where he went. Somewhere far. Somewhere bright. Somewhere crowded. He got in his car. Drove until dawn. Stopped at a rest area. Slept sitting up in the driver's seat. He woke at 3:11. In full daylight. Pinned. Paralyzed. And in the mirror of the passenger side visor, he saw the shape sitting in the back seat, head bowed like someone waiting for him to finish struggling. He blinked. And this time, nothing changed. Some things learn your habits, notice your weak moments, and wait for the part of the night when your guard is lowest. Tell us where you're listening from in the comments. And if you felt the room tighten when the clock hit 3:11, like something watching your breath, Give this video a like and subscribe for more from the Black Hour stories. Some nightmares don't stay in the dark. This is one of the rare ones people swear kept going after they woke up. Welcome to the Black Hour stories. Tonight's tale follows a nightmare that didn't end with daylight. It pressed on, step by step, as if the dream itself wanted to live in the waking world. Stick with this one. The truth behind the nightmare only shows itself near the end, and by then, there's no going back. It began with small things in a quiet apartment on the edge of a Midwestern town. The place was plain, with soft carpets, thin walls, and windows that rattled even on calm days. A man named Carter lived there alone. He liked simple evenings, warm lights, and the steady hum of a box fan that helped him sleep. Nothing scary ever happened there. At least nothing he knew about. He had been sleeping fine for months, but one Sunday night something changed. The apartment felt warmer than usual. The air smelled faintly like wet dirt, even though no windows were open. When he turned off the lamp, the room went still in a way that made him pause. But he told himself the same line people always use. He was just tired. In the first hour of sleep, he drifted into a dream so heavy it felt like sinking. At first, he saw shadows of furniture, nothing solid, like he was moving through his own apartment, but underwater. The sound of dripping filled the space, slow and hollow. A new smell crept in, old, sour, almost like a room that had been shut for years. That was when he saw the hallway. The hallway didn't belong to his apartment. It was longer, darker, crowded with faint shapes on the walls. Something about the end of it pulled at him, steady and patient. With each step he took, the air grew colder. He thought he heard someone walking behind him, matching his pace, but he didn't turn around. Not yet. By the time he reached the end of the hall, his breath fogged the air. The walls were damp and stained. Something creaked behind him, soft but close. In that moment, he realized he wasn't alone in the dream. He tried to wake himself, bit his tongue, shook his head, forced his eyes open. But his feet stayed planted on the wet floor. Then he heard the voice. A whisper right beside his ear, low and dragging, like someone speaking through a thick cloth. It said one word he didn't know, but the sound of it made his stomach clench. He turned around. Nothing was there. But the cold spot where something should have been stayed, pressing against his shoulder. He backed up, shaking. The hall stretched behind him, even longer now. The dripping sound stopped. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then the footsteps began, slow, bare, wet, moving straight toward him. He tried to run, but his legs felt stiff. The footsteps grew faster, heavier, and he felt breaths of cold air on the back of his neck. He didn't want to look again. He didn't want a face. He stumbled forward until the hall opened into a room with no windows, no door, only shadows crawling across the floor like low fog. A shape formed in the far corner, not tall, not short, just wrong, like a person standing at an angle a human body couldn't keep. Its head was tilted too far. Its arms hung loose, as if nothing held the bones inside. It whispered the same word again. This time, he understood what it wanted. It was calling him closer. As the shape shivered into motion, he woke up with a gasp. His sheets were damp with sweat. His fan had stopped working. The apartment felt colder than it should on a warm night. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, telling himself it was just a nightmare. A bad one, but a dream all the same. When he checked the time, the clock read 3:10 a.m., the exact minute the footsteps started in the dream. He shook it off and went to the kitchen for water. The floor felt warm under his feet. Too warm. He thought about the dream and tried to laugh it off. But when he turned on the faucet, the first drops of water smelled like the same wet dirt from the nightmare's hallway. He let it run until the smell faded. On the way back to bed, he froze. The hallway of his real apartment seemed a little darker than usual. Not because the lights were out, because the air inside it looked thicker. like a faint layer of shadow drifted near the ceiling. He stepped into the room, telling himself it was nothing. But when he lay back down and pulled the covers up, he heard something from the hallway. A soft tap, then another. Even, steady taps, spaced apart like someone practicing a slow walk. He sat up and listened hard. The tapping stopped. He didn't sleep again until the sky turned pale blue. The next night, he dreaded going to bed. He tried keeping all the lights on, but the apartment felt wrong once the sun went down. The carpet seemed cooler. The quiet buzz of the fridge seemed lower. When he brushed his teeth, the bathroom mirror fogged at the edges even though the room wasn't warm. He decided he wouldn't fall asleep. But sometime after midnight, his eyes grew heavy and he drifted off without meaning to. The dream came back instantly. Same hallway, same dripping sound, same cold air creeping across his arms. This time he didn't move. He stayed frozen near the start of the hallway, staring at the far end where the darkness thickened. The whisper came sooner, closer, right beside him. Though he didn't turn, he felt breath on his cheek. Something cold brushed the back of his elbow, slow and searching. The word it whispered made the floor ripple like water. He felt something small press against his heel. He spun around. Again, nothing stood behind him. But he sensed something now low, crawling, keeping close to the floor. It circled him, slow and patient. He felt it brush his ankle. When he tried to run, his foot sank into the floor as though the surface had softened. The crawling thing pressed harder, pushing up from underneath, until he could see a clear bulge rising beneath the damp floorboards. He bolted awake. This time, he didn't sit in bed. He shot straight up, bumped into the nightstand, and turned on the lamp with shaking hands. The room looked normal. The fan buzzed again, even though he hadn't touched it. But when he climbed out of bed, the carpet where he slept felt wet. He checked the window. No leak, no spilled water. But his footprints left faint damp marks behind him for several minutes before fading. By the third night, he felt sick from lack of sleep. His eyes burned. His thoughts drifted. Everything in the apartment seemed louder. The hum of the light bulbs, the faint squeak of the vents, the clicking of the fridge door seal. Each sound came in waves as if something deeper echoed behind it. He stayed awake as long as he could, but once again, near 3 a.m., sleep hit him fast. The nightmare didn't wait for him to find his place. It greeted him. He stood in the middle of the dark room again, no hallway this time. Just the windowless, shadow-filled space from the first night. The air felt thick enough to choke on. The shape stood in the same far corner, only now it wasn't crooked or tilted. It was straight, too straight, as if every joint inside had been replaced. It took a slow step forward. This time, its footfall sounded real, like a bare heel slapping wet concrete. Another step. This one louder. He tried to run backward, but the room stretched away from him like rubber. No matter how far he moved, he stayed the same distance from the creeping shape. Its head twitched at a quick, unnatural angle. Its mouth opened too wide. Then it whispered the word again. Only now, he knew what it meant. It wasn't calling him closer. It was telling him it was already here. He woke up with a scream that rang against his walls. Every light in the apartment flickered. The fan shut off. Something tapped on the wall behind his bedsoft at first, then harder, 3 taps. A pause, 3 more louder. He backed away from the wall, shaking. The tapping followed him to the other side of the room. He pressed his hands over his ears, but he still heard it, like it came from inside the drywall. At dawn he packed a bag and left the apartment. But leaving didn't help. His next few nights were spent at a friend's spare room, then a motel, then another friend's couch. No matter where he slept, the nightmare returned. Same room, same shape. But each time, it came closer before he woke. On the 7th night, he refused to sleep at all. But exhaustion wins every fight. He nodded off around sunrise, and the nightmare hit him harder than before. The room was now smaller. The shape stood only a few feet away. Its shadow stretched across the damp floor, reaching for his bare toes. When it raised its arm, its joints cracked like wet sticks. Its skin had the same damp smell as his apartment tap water. When it whispered the word this time, he felt it inside his chest, like cold fingers pressing against his heart. He woke with a jolt so strong he rolled off the couch. As he lay on the floor catching his breath, he realized the worst part wasn't the dream. It was the damp handprint on the edge of the couch cushion. He left town the next day. He drove until his eyes blurred. He found a cheap cabin by a lake far out in the woods. He believed the distance, the open air, the sunlight would help. It didn't. On the second night in the cabin, he woke to a soft dripping sound in the corner of the room. It was quiet, but steady. Slow drops landing on old wood. He used his phone's flashlight to check. Nothing was there. When he turned back toward the bed, he froze. Something had left a trail on the floor. Small, wet footprints, bare, leading straight toward the side of the mattress he had just left. They stopped right where his feet had touched the ground. He looked at the window, half expecting to see someone outside. Instead, the glass was fogged from the inside. A single line was drawn across the center of the fog, like a fingertip dragged through condensation. Later that night, he broke down and finally slept from sheer exhaustion. This time, the nightmare room wasn't dark. It was lit by a dim gray glow, as if dawn had sunk underground. The shape stood right in front of him. Close enough he could smell the damp rot on its skin. Its head tilted slowly until its face leveled with his. Its mouth didn't move, but the whisper still came, stronger than before. He didn't try to run. He understood. It wasn't chasing him. It was waiting for him to understand what it had been saying from the start. The word it whispered was his name. He woke screaming again. The cabin felt colder than the nightmare. The dripping in the corner had returned, faster now. He checked the spot with shaking hands. A puddle spread from the baseboard. Something shifted behind the wall, something dragging itself upward. He ran from the cabin before sunrise, leaving everything behind. He didn't go back for his bag. He didn't go back for anything. He just drove until he reached a busy highway and parked in the first crowded lot he found. For weeks he slept in daylight hours, in public places, staying awake at night. The nightmares didn't return. The tapping didn't follow, the dripping stopped. The air felt dry and clean again. He thought he had outrun it. Then one evening, after weeks without sleep trouble, he checked into a normal hotel room in a normal town, thinking maybe he could finally rest. That night, around 3:10 a.m., he woke to the sound of barefoot steps moving across the carpet. Slow, wet, steady, walking toward his bed. He didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't reach for the light. Something leaned close. The air beside his ear grew cold, and a whisper slid across his skin. It didn't say his name this time. It said a different word. A word that meant it had found him again. A word that meant the nightmare was done waiting for him to sleep. Some nightmares don't stay in the dark. Some learn the way back into the world. If you've ever had one that felt too real, too close, maybe you understand what followed him. Tell us where you're listening from in the comments. And remember to like and subscribe for more stories from the Black Hour Stories. Some people wake from a nightmare and realize it was just fear. Others wake and learn the nightmare woke with them. Here's another one of those cases. Welcome to the Black Hour Stories. Tonight's tale follows a woman who believed her worst nightmare ended when she opened her eyes. But the signs started small. A sound, a shadow, a breath that didn't belong to her. And soon she understood the dream hadn't been a dream at all. It had been a warning, or an invitation. Her name was Mara, and she worked the late shift at a small roadside diner off an old state highway. Most nights were slow. The place smelled like coffee and old linoleum. The ceiling lights buzzed when the temperature dropped, and the parking lot was lit by one crooked street lamp with a moth problem. She usually drove home after midnight, when the roads were empty and the radio was the only voice she heard. But one Thursday, a storm rolled in fast, and the wind made the power lines whip. She clocked out early, hoping to get ahead of the worst of it. Rain hit the car in thick sheets. The wipers squealed. The trees bent toward the road as if something heavy moved through them. She drove with her shoulders tight, leaning forward, waiting for the storm to break. It didn't. When she reached her apartment, the lights were out. The whole building sat dark except for one window on the second floor. A soft yellow glow flickered behind the curtain, even though she knew no one lived in that unit. It had been empty since the previous tenant left suddenly. She told herself the landlord probably left a lamp on by accident. But the curtain moved a little, like something brushed it from inside. She hurried up the stairs, unlocked her door, and went straight to bed without turning on the light. She fell asleep fast, too fast, like something pushed her under. The dream started quiet. Gray light, soft floors, slow air. She stood in a hallway that didn't belong to any place she knew. The walls were peeling, the floor damp, and the smell of cold stone hung in the air. A dim bulb flickered above her, swinging gently even though there was no wind. At the far end of the hallway, a figure stood facing the corner. Bent, still. Its hair hung in long strings over its face. Its arms drooped to its sides, fingers nearly touching the floor. But the worst part was the way its spine pressed against the back of its shirt, sharp and uneven, like something inside it pushed too hard. Mara didn't move. She only listened. There was a sound, a soft, quick tapping, like fingernails ticking across metal. Tap, tap, a pause, tap, another pause, longer this time. The figure in the corner inhaled, long and slow, like waking from sleep. She stepped back. The floor squished under her heel, soaking her sock. She looked down and saw thin water spreading around her feet, dark and icy. She gasped and looked up just as the figure twisted around. It didn't turn normally. It spun, as if pulled by the shoulders, too fast, too stiff. Its face was pale, the mouth wide open, but silent. Its eyes were dark pits, not empty but full of something watching her, studying her. The tapping sped up, fast and sharp. Now it came from every direction. Walls, ceiling, floor. A frantic ticking that made her teeth hurt. The pale figure took one step toward her. Its foot landed with a wet sound. She turned to run, but the hallway stretched like a rubber band pulled back. The lights flickered, turning the walls into a jagged blur. She felt cold fingers brush her sleeve. She didn't want to look back, but she did. She had to. The figure was close now, too close. Its face leaned toward hers, the mouth stretching wider. The tapping stopped for one breath. Then something whispered inside her ear, not from the figure, from something behind her. She woke so fast she almost fell out of bed. Her room was pitch dark. The storm had killed the power. Rain still hammered the windows. She sat up, heart pounding, telling herself it had just been a nightmare. Just a bad dream shaped by the long night at work and the storm outside. But then she smelled something. Cold stone, damp clothes. The same scent from the hallway in the dream. She turned on her phone flashlight and swept it across the room. Nothing there. No water. No shadows moving along the walls. Just her room, quiet and cluttered. She got up to check the front door. The floor felt colder than usual, the air too still. When she reached the door, she saw something on the carpet. 3 small wet footprints, bare, leading from her bed toward the front door. She froze. The prints were small but not childlike. The toes were long, the arch strange, the heel narrow. She crouched closer. The water glistened under her light. But when she put her hand near one, it wasn't warm or cold. It didn't feel like water at all. It felt like breath. She backed away and stood still until the prints faded, drying into the carpet like they had never been there. She didn't sleep again that night. The next day at work, she tried to brush it off. She served coffee, wiped counters, listened to truckers complain about the weather. But every now and then, she felt a chill under her shirt, like someone exhaled across her spine. When she went into the walk-in cooler, she caught her reflection in the metal door. Something stood behind her. She spun around. Nothing was there. When she looked back at the door, her reflection had fogged the steel surface. A single streak ran down the center, like a fingertip dragged through condensation. That night she stayed awake as long as she could, watching the clock. Midnight came. 1:02. She fought sleep until her eyes wouldn't stay open. The moment she drifted off, the dream pulled her back. Same hallway, same damp floors, same flickering light. But the figure wasn't in the corner this time. It was standing right in front of her. Its head hung low. Its hair dripped like it had just come up from deep water. When it raised its face, she saw that its eyes were not pits after all. They were covered by a thin, wet membrane. It twitched as if something moved under it. The tapping started again. This time louder. Tap dash tap dash tap dash tap. She pressed her hands to her ears. It didn't help. The tapping came from inside her head now. The figure's mouth opened, but again no sound came from it. Instead, a voice whispered behind her. A different voice. Low, gravel thick, close. She felt breath brush her neck. The whisper said something she didn't understand, but she knew what it wanted. It wanted her to turn around. It wanted her to see what stood behind her. She didn't turn. She couldn't. The tapping stopped. The voice whispered again. Closer now. Then a hand cold, wet, shaking touched her shoulder. She screamed and woke up, clawing at her sheets. Her room lights were flickering, even though the power had been fine all night. The air felt heavy, humid. She sat up, gasping. She tasted something bitter on her tongue, like old metal. When she swung her legs over the bed, her feet landed in a cold puddle. She jumped back. The puddle rippled. From underneath, something moved under the carpet. Slow, dragging. She grabbed her shoes, keys and phone and ran out of the apartment, locking the door behind her without looking back. She didn't go home for days. She stayed with a co-worker, then in her car, then in a motel near the river. She thought distance would help. But on the third night at the motel, she woke to tapping on the bathroom door. 3 taps, a pause, 3 more. She held her breath. The tapping stopped. Then something whispered her name through the wood. She left the motel before the sun rose. For weeks, she drove from place to place, sleeping in daylight, staying awake at night, refusing to let the dreams catch her. And for a while, the tapping faded. The air stayed dry. The shadows kept their shape. She started to think maybe she had outrun it. Then, one morning, while stopped at a diner 2 states away, she walked into the restroom to wash her hands. When she turned off the faucet and looked up, her reflection fogged the mirror. And there, drawn through the fog, was the shape of a handprint. Not her hand, too long, too thin. Behind her reflection, something moved in the stall. Slow, leaning. She didn't wait to see more. That night, she drove until she found a crowded rest stop with bright lights and people coming and going. She believed the nightmare wouldn't dare follow her there. She fell asleep in her car seat, head back, windows cracked for air. Around 3:12 a.m., she woke to tapping, not on the window, inside the car. Right behind her seat. Tap, tap, tap. She didn't turn around. She sat frozen, breathing shallow while something leaned close to her ear. This time when it whispered, she understood the words. It wasn't calling her. It wasn't asking anything. It was telling her the same thing it had shown her in every dream hallway, every shadowed room, every wet footprint. It had followed her awake, and it wasn't leaving. Sometimes nightmares don't wait for sleep. Sometimes they find the cracks and crawl through. If a dream ever felt too real, maybe it wasn't just fear. Tell us where you're listening from in the comments. And remember to like and subscribe for more stories from the Black Hour Stories. Some nightmares end when the dreamer wakes. Others leave something behind. This story is about one that didn't let go. Welcome to the Black Hour Stories. Tonight's tale follows a man who swore he saw something in a nightmare he shouldn't have been able to see. A thing that didn't belong to sleep. A thing that remembered him. And when he woke, the nightmare wasn't done with him. Stick with this one. The pattern behind what followed him doesn't show until the last stretch of the story, and by then, it's already too late. His name was Jonah. He lived alone in a small duplex on the outskirts of a quiet mountain town. The place was old, thin-walled, with uneven floors that groaned no matter how light his steps were. The air smelled of pine and old paint. Most nights were still, except for the crickets and the faint hum of passing trucks down on the highway. Jonah worked long days at a repair shop and didn't think much about dreams. He slept hard and woke up fast. No nightmares, no strange thoughts. Nothing that ever stuck with him the next morning. That changed one week in early fall. It started on a Tuesday night. The temperature had dropped harder than the forecast predicted, and the duplex creaked in the cold. Jonah went to bed early, pulling an extra blanket over himself. He noticed the room felt colder than the hall, almost like someone had left a window open. But when he checked, everything was shut tight. He turned off the lamp and rolled onto his side. Within minutes, sleep hit him like a wave. The dream began with a sound. A dragging, slow, heavy, like something wet being pulled across a hard floor. Jonah found himself standing in what looked like a basement corridor. Bare concrete walls, rusted pipes overhead. A faint dusting of white powder along the floor that puffed up when he moved. The air hung heavy and cold, with a sour smell rising from the corners. A single light bulb flickered at the far end of the corridor, swinging slightly even though the air was dead still. He thought he was alone at first. Then he heard the dragging again. This time closer. He turned slowly, and the hallway behind him stretched longer than it should have. The walls curved slightly inward at the top, casting deep shadows. Something moved in the darkness. He didn't see it clearly, only the outline low to the ground, long and pulling itself inch by inch. He took a step back. The dragging stopped. He felt the air thicken, as if something large exhaled. Then the sound started again, quicker now. Like it had found its rhythm. Like it was eager. Jonah spun around and ran toward the flickering bulb. The concrete floor felt slick under his feet. The powder rose in thin, pale clouds. The walls seemed to close in with every step, as though the corridor bent to trap him. Halfway to the bulb, he heard a whisper, low, wet, right behind him. He didn't turn around, he couldn't. Every muscle locked. His breath shook in his chest. The whisper came again, dragging the last syllable like a rope pulled through water. He forced himself forward. When he reached the light, he grabbed for the chain to stabilize it. His hand brushed cold metal. The bulb steadied. The shadows behind him shifted. He risked a glance. Something crouched on the floor only a few feet away. Its limbs were too long, too flat, as though its joints held water instead of bone. Its head hung forward, hair dripping down like soaked strings. The floor beneath it glistened. It whispered again. This time, Jonah woke with a violent jerk, hitting his elbow on the nightstand. The room was dark, too dark. His digital clock wasn't lit. The power must have gone out. He rubbed his face, breathing fast, trying to shake off the weight of the dream. Then he heard it. A drip. Steady. Soft. He swung his legs over the bed and felt the cold floor against his feet. He walked toward the bathroom, thinking a faucet had been left open. But the dripping wasn't coming from the sink. It came from under the bed. A slow, heavy drop, then another. He froze. When he bent down enough to look, the dripping stopped. He told himself it was nothing, a pipe settling, water from the cold weather. But he didn't sleep again that night. The next evening, he tried to push the nightmare out of his mind. Work kept him busy. Conversations with co-workers made him feel normal again. Nothing strange happened all day. But the moment he walked into the duplex, the cold returned. Just like the night before, he turned up the old space heater. It rattled, whining at the highest setting, but the temperature barely changed. When he walked down the hall toward his bedroom, he noticed something new. A faint smear. Dark, long, dragged across the base of the wall. He knelt down and touched it. The smear was damp. He jerked his hand back, wiped it on his jeans, and stepped away. The duplex had old plumbing, sure, but this wasn't a leak. This was a trail. But from what? He didn't want to answer that. He went to bed late, hoping exhaustion would knock him out so deeply he wouldn't dream at all. But the nightmare didn't wait for him to drift into it. It yanked him in. He fell straight back into the corridor. Same flickering light, same sour smell, same cold air. Only this time, the dragging sound didn't echo from a distance. It scraped right beside him. Jonah spun to the left. Nothing. The dragging echoed again, sharper this time. To the right. Still nothing. Then he felt a hand wrap around his ankle. Ice-cold fingers gripped hard, pulling him backward. He hit the ground, sliding across the powdery floor. He clawed at the concrete. His nails scraped. He kicked with his free leg, connecting with something soft and wet. The grip loosened. He scrambled to his feet and ran, his breath burning. The lights above flickered faster, bursting into a staccato rhythm. The corridor stretched unnaturally, turning corners that hadn't been there before. He stopped when he reached a dead end. He turned around, chest heaving. At first he thought the corridor was empty. Then he saw it. The shape. It wasn't crawling anymore. It stood upright, tall enough that its soaked hair brushed the pipes overhead. Its limbs twitched as if learning how to move correctly. Its face hung low, hidden in shadow. It took one step toward him. The sound of the step echoed like a wet slap. Jonah pressed himself against the wall. His vision blurred. His heartbeat roared. The shape tilted its head back, slowly, smoothly, too smoothly. When he saw its face, he screamed. That was when he woke up, his throat sore, his blankets twisted. The power was back on, but the lamp flickered as though something had brushed it. His digital clock read 3:16 a.m. He tried to calm down, focusing on the soft hum of the heater. Then he smelled something. The same sour scent from the dream. He got up, walked to the hall, and froze. A trail of dark smears lined the floor, leading from his bedroom to the living room. He followed it slowly, each step loud in the quiet duplex. The smears ended near the front door, pooling in a small, uneven pattern. When he stepped closer, a faint chill hit his ankles. The pool rippled. He backed away and grabbed his keys. He drove to a friend's house and slept on the couch. No dreams that night, no whispering. But when he came home the next morning to shower, the trail on the floor was gone. Not cleaned, gone. The wood looked untouched. But the smell lingered. That night he refused to sleep in the duplex. He got a room at a motel off the highway. The place was cheap, with thin blankets and buzzing fluorescent bulbs. He left the TV on for noise, hoping it would drown out his thoughts. Sleep came slow. But the dream found him anyway. This time he didn't start in the corridor. He started in his own bedroom. The dream version of it was dim, as if seen underwater. The bed sagged. The walls pulsed. The air felt thick and wet. Jonah stood frozen near the doorway. Something shifted under the bed. Then the dragging began. Louder now, closer. It scraped along the underside of the mattress, slow and eager. A whisper rose from the floorboards. It said one word, his name. The bed lifted an inch, then two. Something pushed from underneath, trying to find space. The sheets rippled as though small waves traveled across them. Jonah stumbled back. A pale hand slid out from under the bed. Long fingers, dripping, flexing like they hadn't been used in years. He screamed himself awake. The motel room was normal. The TV buzzed. The air conditioner hummed. Everything was in its place. Except for one thing. A dark smear sat near the door, small but fresh. Jonah left the motel within 5 minutes. He didn't even grab the toothbrush he'd left on the bathroom sink. The next few days blurred. He barely slept. He worked long hours to stay tired. When he did nap, even for a minute, he woke choking on the smell of cold stone. He began flinching at small noises, a chair scraping, a door shutting, anything that echoed too long. On the 4th night, he drove up into the mountains to clear his head. He parked at a lookout point with a wide view of the valley. The air was crisp and clean. A perfect place to rest for a few hours. He leaned the seat back and closed his eyes. But the dream didn't wait. He found himself in the corridor again. But it had changed. It looked bigger now, deeper, and the shape. It wasn't in the shadows anymore. It stood only a few feet away, tall, but its body sagged like the weight of the water inside it pulled its skin downward. Its mouth hung open, just enough to show something moving inside. It stepped closer. Each step left a smear on the floor. Jonah backed away, but the corridor didn't stretch this time. The shape did. It grew taller with each step. Its shadow crawled across the walls like living ink. Its whisper scraped along the concrete, vibrating through his bones. Jonah shouted, begged, ran. None of it mattered. The shape reached out. Its fingers brushed his chest. The cold hit him so hard he felt his heart stutter. He woke up screaming. The windshield was fogged from the inside. In the center of the glass, drawn through the fog, was a long finger streak. He drove without stopping until sunrise. For 2 weeks he tried to stay awake. He drank coffee until his hands shook. He slept in public places, hoping the nightmare wouldn't follow. But it didn't matter. Every time he slept, even for seconds, the shape came closer. And every time he woke, he found some sign of it in the real world. A smear, a drip, a whisper he wasn't sure he hadn't imagined. The final night came at another motel. A newer one. Bright lights, clean walls, nothing creepy about it. Jonah told himself the nightmare couldn't follow him forever. But around 3:21 a.m., he opened his eyes without waking. He was back in his duplex bedroom. He knew it was a dream. But it didn't feel like one. The air was heavy enough that breathing felt like work. The door trembled. Something thumped against it once, then again, slow, patient. The door cracked. A hand slid through the gap. Not pale this time, blackened, bloated, dripping. The whisper came from beyond the door. His name. The door burst open and the shape crawled through, taller now than any ceiling. Jonah tried to run, but his feet were rooted to the floor. The shape lowered itself, its head bending at an angle that made his stomach twist. Then it spoke a second word, one he didn't understand, but he felt what it meant. It wasn't hunting him, it was calling him back. He fell backward and hit the floor. He woke in the motel bed, gasping. Then he froze. Something stood at the foot of the bed, tall, dripping, tilting its head slowly. He shut his eyes. When he opened them, the shape was closer, breath cold against his face. He didn't scream, he didn't move. He only listened as the whisper seeped into his ear. It wasn't calling his name. It was telling him what it wanted now. It wanted him awake. All the time. Some nightmares don't chase you. They wait for you to stop running. If you've ever woken unsure whether the dream ended, you know how thin that line can be. Tell us where you're listening from in the comments. And remember to like and subscribe for more stories from the Black Hour Stories. 3 friends thought a simple sleepover would be safe. They were wrong. Something inside the house had been waiting for them to turn out the lights. Welcome to the Black Hour Stories. Tonight's tale dives straight into a sleepover that began with jokes and late-night snacks, but ended with fear, none of them could explain. They thought they were alone in the house. They weren't. It started on a warm Friday night, the kind that seemed made for junk food, loud laughter, and stories told under blankets. 3 friends, Nina, Jessa, and Leah, met at Nina's house while her parents were out of town. The place sat at the end of a long, quiet street, lined with old trees that bent over the road like tired giants. Inside, the air smelled like pizza and buttery popcorn. The house felt safe in that way familiar homes usually did. The girls spread their sleeping bags across the living room floor. The TV flickered with some old late-night movie in the background. The house felt warm, but every so often, a cool draft crawled under the door from the hallway, even though all the windows were shut. They joked it was just the air conditioner acting up again. The first odd thing came from the upstairs hallway. Nina's room was up there, and she remembered closing her door before coming downstairs. But when she went up to grab a charger, the door was wide open. Her room was dark, and the air inside felt cold enough to fog her breath for a second. She brushed it off, thinking maybe she had just forgotten, and headed back down. A little later, the 3 of them started sharing scary stories. They kept the room dim except for the TV's glow. As they talked, the draft from the hallway grew colder. It slipped around their ankles like something breathing slow and steady right against their skin. They pulled blankets closer and told themselves it was just the thermostat again. Then came the sound. A slow creak from the top of the stairs. It was faint, like someone putting weight on an old wooden step. They froze, staring at the stairway that disappeared into darkness. The house had never felt so open and empty at the same time. Jessa laughed first, trying to shake off the tension. "Probably the house settling," she said. But even she didn't sound convinced. The creak came again, a little louder, then stopped. They turned the TV up and tried to ignore it. But the noise came back. This time it wasn't a creak. It was a soft, steady tapping. Like fingers on wood. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, patient, coming from upstairs. Nina's heart pounded as she forced herself to walk over to the bottom of the stairs. She stared up but saw nothing but darkness. The tapping stopped the moment she moved closer, as if whoever or whatever made it was watching her. Back on the living room floor, they tried to distract themselves with a card game. They kept glancing toward the stairs, even though none of them wanted to. The air felt heavier, like the whole house was waiting to exhale. A sudden bang came from upstairs, sharp, too loud to ignore. Something had fallen or been pushed. Nina jumped, grabbing the railing as if the stairs might come alive. Leah's hands shook so much she dropped her cards. They considered calling one of Nina's neighbors, but none of them wanted to admit they were scared. They tried to laugh it off again, but the house felt different now, like it was listening. The noises stopped for a while, quiet enough that they convinced themselves it might have been a book falling from a shelf or something harmless. They played on, trying to regain some sense of normal. Then, out of nowhere, the living room lights flickered. Once, twice. Then they shut off completely. The TV went dark with them. The house dropped into silence so deep it felt like a vacuum. The only light came from a weak glow spilling from the kitchen nightlight far down the hall. Nina whispered for everyone to stay still. Her voice trembled, and even whispering felt too loud. In the dark, another sound rose. A soft scrape, like nails dragging across fabric. It came from somewhere behind them, slow, pulling, scratching the surface of one of their sleeping bags. Jessa gasped. The sound stopped. They didn't move for a long time. Their breathing sounded too sharp in the stillness. When the lights snapped back on all at once, they blinked hard. Nothing in the room had changed. Nothing seemed out of place. But the feeling of being watched clung to them like cold sweat. Trying to shake off the fear, they all decided to move their things into Nina's room upstairs. Strength in numbers, Leah joked weakly. But none of them really wanted to go up those stairs. The house felt different up there, like the air had thickened. Nina's room was still cold, colder than the rest of the house. They closed the door behind them and locked it. In that locked room, they turned on every lamp and sat close together. For a while, nothing happened. They started to relax. They even joked that the pizza must have been messing with them. But then, without warning, the temperature in the room dropped again. Their breath fogged the air. The lamps dimmed but didn't go out, and out in the hallway, footsteps began to move. Not creaks, not taps, footsteps, slow, heavy, moving from one end of the hall to the other. Then the doorknob turned. It twisted once, then again, harder, as if someone was trying to open the door from the outside. The girls froze. Leah's hands covered her mouth. Jessa clutched her blanket tight. The knob stopped turning. Silence swallowed the hall. Nina stepped forward slowly. She pressed her ear against the door. At first she heard nothing. Then she heard breathing, close, right behind the wood. A long, deep breath like someone standing only inches away. She backed away fast. The footsteps returned, this time heading down the hall toward the stairs. The girls listened as they faded until they could no longer hear them. They waited in silence, but the quiet only made things worse. Every minute felt an hour long. The house didn't feel empty. It felt crowded, filled with invisible eyes. Later in the night, a soft knock tapped against the window beside Nina's bed. 3 taps, slow and even. They turned toward the window, but the blinds were drawn. Nina's room was on the 2nd floor. Nothing should have been able to reach that window. The tapping stopped as quickly as it began. They didn't sleep. They couldn't. Even when they closed their eyes, they felt something watching them. The air grew colder still, like the temperature outside in winter. They huddled together in a single sleeping bag, hoping morning would come soon. Then, around 3 in the morning, Leah noticed something. A shadow on Nina's wall. A faint outline that didn't match any lamp in the room. It had the shape of a person standing in the corner, tall and unmoving. She whispered for the others to look. When they did, the shadow didn't flicker. It didn't shift. It simply stood there. Nina turned her lamp toward the corner. The light reached the wall, but the shadow didn't disappear. It stayed, stronger, darker, like it wasn't coming from the light at all. The room grew silent as stone until the shadow moved. Not fast, not slow. Just a simple shift of its head, turning toward them. The girls screamed and bolted for the door. They didn't stop to look behind them. They flew down the stairs, nearly tripping over each other, and ran out the front door into the cold night air. They sat on the porch steps under the streetlight until dawn. None of them spoke. None of them went back inside until the sun rose completely. And even then, they went in only to grab their things. When Nina's parents returned, they noticed the house felt colder than before. They also asked why every upstairs lamp had been left on. The girls didn't know how to explain. They never had another sleepover at that house. And Nina moved out less than a year later. But every now and then, she still remembers the sound of footsteps in that hallway, and the slow turning of the doorknob, as if something inside the house had waited a long time to be noticed. Once in a while, when she's driving past her old street, She sees the lights flicker in the upstairs window, even though the new owners swear no one uses that room anymore. Some places don't like being forgotten, and some things inside them wait for the next quiet night. Tell us where you're listening from in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from the Black Hour Stories. Welcome back to the Black Hour Stories. Tonight we return to sleepovers that should have been harmless, but turned into something no one could explain. Here are two more tales of nights ruined by things that slipped into the quiet when the lights went out. It happened at Maya's cousin's house out in a quiet suburb where every driveway looked the same. Maya hated sleeping anywhere unfamiliar, but her cousin Torai begged her to stay for the weekend. The house smelled like vanilla and dust, and the AC rattled as if it was always about to give out. Torai's room was small but warm, filled with posters and soft lights. At first, it felt safe. They spent the night making bracelets and whispering about school. The room felt cozy with the little lamp glowing amber. But around midnight, the AC clicked off. The air went dead still. The room seemed to tighten, like everything was waiting for something to move. Maya heard it first. A soft, thin whisper coming from the floor. It sounded like someone breathing words through a crack. She froze and grabbed Torai's arm. They listened. At first, nothing came. Then the whisper slid out again, faint but clear. "Is someone awake?" The voice wasn't a child's voice or an adult's. It felt like a voice that didn't belong anywhere. It came from under the bed. Tori whispered that it was probably something outside, maybe the water heater or pipes. But there was no water heater under the floor, and no pipe whispered someone's name. The whisper came again. Longer this time. Slow, like someone trying to remember how to speak. "Maya, I know you hear me." Every hair on her arms rose. She clutched her blanket and stared at the bed frame. Torai told her to stop listening, stop imagining things, but even her voice trembled. They stayed frozen in the glow of the lamp. Then the whisper changed. It wasn't asking anymore, it was begging. "Let me out." Maya backed up so fast she knocked over a cup of beads. They scattered across the floor in every direction. The whisper rose again, this time angry, like whoever was beneath the bed had grown tired of waiting. "Let me out." The floorboards under the bed thumped. Once, twice. Something hit the underside hard enough to shake the mattress. Torai screamed. She grabbed Maya and reached for the doorknob. But the knob was ice cold. Too cold for a room with no AC running. Their breath fogged the air. The thumping grew faster, harder. Whatever was under that bed was pushing up like it wanted to break through the mattress. When they finally yanked the door open, a cold gust pushed past them, as if the room had been holding its breath and finally let go. They raced to the living room, where the lights felt too bright and too warm. Torai's mother found them trembling and demanded to know what was wrong. They couldn't explain it. They couldn't even go back into the room to grab their pillows. Later, when Torai's parents checked the room, nothing was under the bed. No animals. No loose floorboards. No drafts. But all the beads Maya dropped were gone. Every last one. They never found a single one under the bed or anywhere else. That night, Maya slept on the couch. Torai slept beside her. Neither of them dared to enter that room again. The next morning, Torai's mother said the A-key must have made strange noises, but the girls never believed that. On the ride home, Maya kept thinking about the whisper knowing her name. Soft, hungry, patient. It felt like whatever was under that bed wasn't trying to scare her. It was trying to reach her. And now it knew exactly who she was. Let's start story 3. The girl in the mirror. Gabby loved sleepovers at her friend Hannah's house because Hannah's room had a huge old mirror leaning against the wall. It looked like something pulled from an attic, tall, heavy, and framed with dark wood, carved with strange patterns. Hannah always said it belonged to her great-grandmother. No one knew where it came from before that. That night they stayed up eating chips and watching videos until the house got quiet. The mirror stood across from them, catching bits of moonlight through the window. It felt like a doorway more than a piece of glass. Around 1 in the morning, Hannah fell asleep first. Gabby stayed up scrolling on her phone. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the fridge downstairs. She looked at the mirror without really meaning to, and that's when she noticed something strange. Her reflection wasn't moving right. She lifted her hand to wipe her face. Her reflection lifted its hand, but not at the same time, just a little late, like it needed a moment to understand what to do. Gabby froze. She waved slowly. The reflection waved back, but with a strange stiffness in its wrist, as if copying her took effort. She looked over at Hannah to see if she was awake. When she glanced back at the mirror, her reflection was standing. Gabby wasn't. She lay in her sleeping bag on the floor. But the girl in the mirror stood tall, staring at her with a flat, empty expression. Then the reflection leaned forward, pressing both hands to the inside of the glass. Gabby scrambled backward, knocking into Hannah. Hannah woke up groggy, asking what was happening, but Gabby could barely speak. She pointed to the mirror. The reflection wasn't there anymore. Hannah told her she must have been dreaming while half awake, but Gabby refused to look at the mirror again. They tried to settle down and go back to sleep. For a few minutes, the room felt normal again. Then Gabby heard a soft tapping. Knuckles against glass. Tap, tap. She could see the mirror from the corner of her eye. She didn't want to look directly at it. But the tapping grew louder, faster, urgent. Hannah finally turned on the lamp. The mirror was fogged over from the inside. A handprint appeared on the glass, then another, then a third. More and more pressed against the inside surface, as if many hands were trapped in there, pushing hard to get out. The fog swirled like breath, thick and fast. Gabby screamed. Hannah pulled her toward the door, but the room grew colder as they moved. The mirror rattled against the wall like something was slamming into it from behind. Just as they reached the hallway, the rattling stopped. They glanced back. A new reflection stood in the mirror. Not Gabby, not Hannah, a girl neither of them had ever seen. Her hair hung damp around her face, her eyes dark and hollow. She pressed her forehead to the glass as if watching them leave. They ran downstairs and spent the rest of the night on the couch with every light on. When Hannah's mom checked the mirror the next day, it stood still and clean, showing nothing strange. But Hannah later told Gabby something she hadn't wanted to say that night. Her great-grandmother didn't buy that mirror. She found it locked in a room of an abandoned house she used to clean. A room whose windows were sealed and whose door had been nailed shut from the outside. That mirror was the only thing inside. Gabby never spent the night there again. And Hannah told her that sometimes, when she's alone in her room, the mirror fogs up by itself, even when the air is warm. Some things come alive only when the house goes quiet, and some stay close long after the night ends. Tell us where you're listening from in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from the Black Hour Stories. Here's a brand new tale added under the same title. Another sleepover that went wrong the moment the lights went out. What followed left everyone afraid of the dark for good. Welcome to the Black Hour Stories. Tonight we add another tale to our growing list of sleepovers that should have been safe, but turned into something none of the kids could explain. This one starts with a simple backyard tent, a quiet night, and a presence that didn't belong on the other side of the canvas. Alex always loved camping, but this was the first time he ever tried it in someone's backyard. His friend Carson had a big fenced yard with tall trees that blocked the neighbors on every side. Carson's parents set up a large canvas tent for the boys to spend the night. It was one of those thick, old camping tents with metal poles and a heavy zipper door, the kind you could hear every sound through. It was a warm night, the grass still holding the heat from the day. Crickets chirped from the bushes. The air smelled like charcoal from the grill and the faint sweetness of the trees. The boys filled the tent with flashlights, sleeping bags, and enough snacks to last all weekend. At first, the night was nothing but jokes and whispered stories. They built a little lantern glow inside the tent that made everything yellow and cozy. The fence creaked now and then in the breeze, but that was normal for Carson's yard. Everything felt harmless in that easy, suburban way. Around midnight, the house lights went off in the windows behind them. Carson's parents had turned in. The yard fell into a softer darkness. The boys settled into their sleeping bags, talking about school, games, and who could sleep the longest without waking up. Then the first sound came. A soft drag across the tent wall. Something brushing the canvas low to the ground. It wasn't wind. It wasn't branches. It was too slow, too steady, as if fingers were sliding across the fabric. Alex sat up right away. Carson did too. The tent wall pressed inward slightly, like something was leaning on it from the outside. The fabric dented inward right next to their heads, then slid along the side with a faint scrape. They froze. Neither of them said a word. The dragging sound moved toward the back of the tent. The grass outside rustled softly. Something was circling them. Carson whispered that it was probably one of the neighbor's dogs. Alex wanted to believe that, but the fence was too high, and the gate had been locked. No dog could slip inside without making noise. The scraping returned this time right at the foot of the tent. Slow, curious, like something feeling the shape of the tent with its hands. Alex clicked on his flashlight and shined it at the canvas. The light pushed through the fabric, brightening the shape of the wall. For a moment, they saw nothing. Then a shadow rolled across it. Low, wrong-shaped, too long in the arms, too smooth in the way it moved. It passed by in one silent glide, like it didn't quite touch the ground. The boys whispered to each other, trying to come up with some excuse, some explanation that would make sense. But the shadow didn't match anything they knew. The scraping stopped for a long minute. The yard grew still. Even the crickets went silent. Silence so complete, it felt like something had stepped into the space between all sound. Then the breathing started. Right outside the tent wall, slow, steady breaths. Each exhale made the fabric tremble. The breathing was too close, as if the mouth was only inches from the canvas. Alex held the flashlight tight. Carson grabbed the zipper on the tent door, but didn't open it. Neither of them wanted to see what waited outside. The breathing got louder, wet, thick, like someone inhaling with effort. Something pressed a single point into the tent wall like a finger. It dragged downward, slow and straight, leaving a long dent in the fabric. At the bottom, it stopped. Then another finger joined it, and another. A whole hand pressed into the canvas, then another hand beside it. Both pushed inward as if something was preparing to crawl inside through the wall itself. Alex dropped the flashlight. The boys scrambled to the far side of the tent, hearts pounding, breath sharp as glass. The hands dragged their way upward, stretching the fabric like it was about to tear. Carson whispered for Alex to run, but there was nowhere to run without stepping outside. Then came the worst sound of the night. A tap on the metal tent pole, a light, curious tap. Then another and another, like someone testing the strength of the frame. The tapping climbed up the pole, slow, rhythmic, almost thoughtful. The boys held their breath. Neither dared move. Suddenly the tapping stopped. A new sound replaced it, something small dropping into the grass outside, like pebbles falling. But the sound was too soft, too sticky. Whatever it was, it landed close to the tent door. Alex whispered that they had to make a run for the house. Carson shook his head at first, scared to even stand. But the silence outside grew heavier, like the thing had paused right at the door. Finally, they counted to 3 under their breath. Carson ripped down the zipper. Cold night air rushed in. The yard was pitch dark, except for the house light far across the lawn. The boys bolted across the grass barefoot, stumbling, pushing each other forward. Behind them, something moved fast across the yard, too fast, too light, like it didn't step but skimmed. Alex didn't dare look back, but he heard it, a faint rasp, like nails skimming the grass as it crawled. When they reached the porch, the motion lights snapped on. The yard lit up in a wide, bright glow. Nothing moved. The tent stood still. The fence swayed, but nothing crawled. Nothing watched them. Nothing breathed against the canvas. Carson's dad opened the door, half asleep and angry, asking what they were doing. The boys tried to explain, but the words came out tangled. He walked them back to the yard with a flashlight, annoyed but curious. The tent was empty. Everything looked normal except for one thing. On the side of the tent where the hands had pressed, long streaks ran down the fabric. Not tears, not dirt. Something dark, almost shiny, like the residue left by wet fingertips. No footprints. No tracks, no broken fence boards, no sign of anything living. Carson's dad swore it was sap from the trees. But the streaks didn't smell like sap. They smelled like metal. Cold and sharp. The boys slept inside the house for the rest of the night. Carson took the tent down the next morning and stuffed it into the trash bin. But Alex swears he heard something moving in the bushes before they went back inside. Something low. Something patient. Something that knew they were watching for it now. Some things wander places they don't belong, and some wait for the night when a quiet tent is the only thing between them and the living. Tell us where you're listening from in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from the Black Hour Stories. Let's move to our next one. This sleepover looked ordinary until something in the house started calling from a place no one should ever answer. Welcome back to the Black Hour Stories. Tonight we add another full tale to this collection of sleepovers that turned into encounters with the impossible. This one follows a group of friends who thought the scariest part of the night would be their own jokes, until the house itself began whispering their names. Our first story is the phone that called from the attic. Most of the time, Emma's house felt cheerful. It was old, but it carried the warm smell of coffee, laundry soap, and the lemon cleaner her mom used every Sunday. Her friends loved staying over because the place always felt lived in, never too quiet, never too empty. But there was one place none of them liked. The attic. The door to it sat at the end of the upstairs hall. A square panel with a pull string that hung just low enough to brush the top of Emma's head if she got too close. The wood around it was darker than the ceiling, as if someone had scrubbed at it for years and never got it clean. Nothing strange ever happened with it, at least not when adults were around, but every kid who visited said the same thing about the attic. It felt like someone was standing on the other side of the door, waiting. That night, Emma had two friends sleeping over, Brianna and Kayla. Her parents were gone for the evening and wouldn't be back till late. The girls filled the house with loud, goofy chatter, the kind meant to drown out the quiet. They made microwave popcorn, spilled half of it, and left a trail up the stairs as they ran to Emma's room. The night started soft and easy. A movie on Emma's laptop. A pile of blankets. The faint hum of the fridge downstairs. Everything felt safe until the first sound came. A phone ringing. Not Emma's phone. Not the house phone either. Her parents had switched to cell only years ago. This ring was different. Old. Metallic. The kind of ring you only heard on phones with actual bells inside them. Brianna asked where it was coming from. Emma listened, and her stomach tightened. The ringing came from the attic door. The phone rang once, then again, echoing softly under the ceiling panel, like someone had tucked a rotary phone among the boxes and dusty furniture upstairs. The three girls stared at the attic door from down the hall. None of them moved. Kayla said it was impossible. Emma agreed. But the phone kept ringing, steady as a heartbeat. It didn't stop until Emma's laptop glitched and paused the movie, the sound crackling like static. When the ringing stopped, the attic went back to its heavy silence. The girls sat together, waiting for something else to happen, but nothing did. Eventually, they convinced themselves it was a noise from outside, maybe a neighbor working late or a ringtone coming from the street. They settled back into the movie and tried to forget it. Half an hour later, the phone rang again. This time it was louder, sharper. Each ring felt like it cut straight through the ceiling and into their ears. The girls didn't even want to walk past the attic door, but the sound kept going, relentless and steady. Emma finally stepped into the hall with her flashlight. The air was cold near the attic door, colder than the rest of the house. She could see her breath faintly in the beam of the light. Kayla and Brianna stayed behind her, gripping each other's arms, whispering for her not to touch anything. The phone rang again. Emma put her hand on the pull string. Just touching it felt wrong, like the cord hadn't been used in decades, yet somehow held warmth, as if someone had just handled it from the other side. Before she could pull it, the phone stopped ringing. The girls backed away fast and ran into Emma's room. They shut the door, turned on every lamp and tried to calm down. None of them wanted to admit they were scared, but the way their voices shook made it obvious. Around midnight, Emma's mom texted to say she'd be home later than planned. The girls didn't respond right away. They just sat on the floor, blankets wrapped around their shoulders, listening. For a while, the house stayed quiet, too quiet. Even the fridge downstairs stopped humming. The whole place felt paused, as if holding its breath. Then the attic phone rang again. Only this time, it wasn't just a ringing. A voice spoke between each ring. Not words, not anything human. A long, distorted breath that pushed through the bell sound, like someone exhaling inside the metal of the phone itself. The noise slid down the hallway like cold air. It echoed under the bedroom door, through the cracks, into the room. The girls covered their ears, but they could still hear it. The voice was faint, but it was there. Something calling from the attic. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Brianna whispered that they needed to get downstairs where it felt safer. Kayla tried the door. It opened easily, but the hallway outside was darker than before, as if all the upstairs lights had dimmed at once. The attic phone kept ringing. Slower now, methodical, as if waiting for someone to answer. They hurried down the stairs, trying not to look back. Halfway down, a sharp click echoed above them, the attic door swinging open by itself. They didn't see it. They didn't have to. The heavy wooden thud traveled through the house like a shock. At the bottom of the stairs, the air grew warmer again. The lights returned to normal. The house hum picked up where it left off, like someone flipped a switch. The ringing stopped. They waited in the living room with every light on. They turned on the TV, not watching anything, simply letting the noise fill the space. They sat close, thinking about the attic door, wondering what might have been waiting on the other side. Just after 1 in the morning, Emma's mom came home. She found the 3 girls curled up together on the couch, wide-eyed and silent. When Emma tried explaining the ringing, her mom said something that made the girls fall quiet. "The attic doesn't have a phone. It's never had power up there. That space hasn't been used since before we moved in." Emma asked if anything had been left behind in the attic by the old owners. Her mom hesitated. She said the previous family warned them not to store anything up there because of a strange noise problem, but they never described what kind of noise. The next morning, Emma's mom opened the attic to prove everything was fine. The space was empty, all except for one thing. A single rotary phone sitting on the floor, unplugged, its cord frayed and cut. Dust covered everything except the phone's receiver, as if someone had been holding it recently. Emma's mom threw the phone out immediately. But that night, after the sleepover ended and her friends went home, Emma heard a faint metallic ringing from the trash bin outside. She didn't check it. She didn't go near the attic again either. And sometimes, when the house gets quiet, she swears she can still hear it, one soft ring coming from somewhere above her head. Some calls never come from the living, and some doors stay closed for a reason. Tell us where you're listening from in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from the Black Hour Stories.